Hey ghoul friends, it's me, Adrian, or Ayden, either way. I am still your host, and you are still listening to Susto, the podcast of ooky spooky scary stories. Welcome back, and thank you for being here. And if this is your first time, welcome. Choose a plot in the cemetery. We're happy to have you. Ghoul friends, today we are in for a very special treat. As you may have seen from the title, today on the podcast we have Bex Carlos from Tía Bruja. If you have not listened, Tía Bruja is a witchy podcast hosted by Bex. She is the witchy aunt you never knew you needed. Bex has an amazing history in FM radio and podcast editing, and also, as it says in the title of her show, she is your witchy aunt. Bex is going to talk a little bit more about her background and her work. I'm excited for y'all to listen to this episode, but before we get into that, you know what's really scary? It's really scary when you don't like and subscribe and share and comment and do all those things to interact with the algorithm online. As you all know, that is the easiest way to support the show, and I super appreciate it. So if you are willing to, please go ahead and do all that. And on top of that, if you have your own scary stories that you would like me to share on a Letters from the Beyond episode, like in the last episode, you already know how to do that. Send it in an email, DM, via the website, smoke signals, carrier pigeons, contact me on the Ouija board. You know all those different ways, and those are some of my favorite episodes. If you haven't listened to that last one, I highly suggest it. I did my best to give every single story the Susto treatment with the music and the sound effects and all that, so I really hope that you enjoyed it. Aside from that, not too many updates on the show, but if you want to follow along on the things that I am up to, you can do so by following at Susto Podcast on every single social media platform. That's pretty much it for today, so let's go ahead and get into it. Bex, thank you so much for being here. Everybody, saludan tu tía. Everybody say hi.
Oh, gracias. Ayden, no, thanks. Thank you so much for having me on. It's a pleasure.
Of course. So, I mean, we mentioned this in recording the episode for your show as well. So if y'all are listening here, after listening to this, go to Tu Tía Bruja, subscribe, follow, hit all the buttons, and then listen to our episode there. But we were saying that this is long overdue. The universe was telling us something, and we had no choice but to listen. So we're finally here, and I am so grateful, and I'm so happy to have you on the show. Could you tell the folks that are listening a little bit about yourself and about what you do?
Yeah, so I am a self-proclaimed audio witch. I've been working in audio for the better part of like 12 years. I went to school for mass media. I worked in commercial radio for 7 years. And it's funny because around the time that I was doing that, I went to New Orleans for the first time. And I feel like if you want to be a witch, like that's it. That's what you do. Yeah. You go to New Orleans. I mean, Salem has a lot of cool energy too, but I feel like if you are a marginalized, like Mexican, Latino, Black individual, like you're going to have such a connection there. And I went to Marie Laveau's grave and I asked for an offering to just like become the person I'm meant to be. And after that point, I started buying all these little candles and oils, and I was just like hooked, you know? And so, you know, I ended up not working commercial radio for too terribly long after that. I kind of just started editing podcasts as something to keep my, you know, editing work and the audio work keep going. So I did a bunch of different shows, and then in 2020, I kind of like, after a failed pancake of a different show that I worked on called Explain to Me that I really enjoyed, but it's weird when you're talking about really radical things and nobody else wants to be identified, and I'm like, well, shit. No. Like, if that's the case, then I'll do it on my own. Like, I don't need this, you know? Like, yeah. And it was fine, you know? I decided to, like, branch out on my own, and I feel like I've been bringing this radical sense of, because for whatever reason, people, when they think of, like, spiritualism, magia, brujeria, like, one, it always has such an evil connotation, and two, right, it's just like that it's not rooted in social justice. And so, you know, my podcast is about, one, giving people and making people aware that, like, the power we have in just self and, like, really believing in the things you can do. We talk about, like, fun stories, scary stuff, like, I'm really into cannabis, and cannabis is such a medicinal plant. So there's episodes about that. My show is like a modge podge of like, what is this girl's like hyper fixation right now? Is she into ghosts? Is she into cocktails? Like what let's see what we're in for. And so yeah, it's been this labor of love, and more often than not, when I throw spaghetti at the wall content wise, it sticks and people like it. And it's cool, you know, because a lot of people I think discredit or make me feel like, oh, you don't follow a normal recipe for what a podcast is. I'm like, yeah, okay. Like, and I'm like, this is my little art project. Like, yeah. Fuck off. So that's so funny. Yeah, that's what I do.
Yeah, I mean that analogy is so perfect. Just like throwing the spaghetti at the wall and like hoping a couple noodles will stick. I feel like that's something that we as content creators, we kind of have to do now if we want people to see our content. Is it could be good or bad. I enjoy it because I've always enjoyed making digital content. So being able to use all of those skills to funnel to my show, I think, and I think you can relate to this. I think it's fun. I think it's exciting. Like you said, you know, what's the hyperfixation of the week? Anybody who signed up for my Patreon will know. They will know what those fixations are. They're like, oh, he's doing paper crafts. He's foiling. He's making stickers. So, but yeah, I think that's like the really fun part of creating that others may find laborious. But I really enjoy it sometimes. Yes, it is a lot of work. It is a ton of work, especially when you don't have a team. But it's fun.
It is fun. It's funny because like sometimes when I'm just like going about my everyday, you know, I just think about what I fill my time with. And, you know, sometimes I'm like, I just want to create fun, cool things. And right now, for the first time in a long time, I've had nothing but time and the ability to dedicate to just myself and my work. And I'm like, I don't know, it's this cool reminder that when you really kind of just focus on yourself, you're able to do things. We were talking about this like on my podcast episode recording that we did, is I only started teaching like metaphysical classes last year, and it was because I worked at a shop, and she was like, have you ever thought about teaching a class? I'm like, I can't do that. That's adult stuff. What do you mean? You know? And she's like, don't you have a podcast? And I'm like, I guess I do, don't I?
You're like, well, first of all, I'm literally just a baby.
I'm just a baby. I'm baby. But no, I was able to like PowerPoint and come up with this whole thing. And I was just like hyper fixated on like cannabis and, you know, how it's been such a medicinal like marvel, and you know, like again, hyperfixation of the week. And I dedicated like a week, maybe two, to like just researching and adding like magic components and how I incorporate it. And it's a fun class, you know. I've been able to do it through Sincerely Craft in St. Louis, shout out. It's wild because in a lot of places where cannabis is legal, it's really weird, like, you know, with their systems or like their, you know, so I don't know. There's something cool, you know, again, we talked about this on the last recording, like the opportunity now. I mean, obviously the pandemic, we're still feeling the impacts of it, but I think all that time we were in lockdown made us just so solitary in our way of being and working and practicing. And it's nice to be able to like find community again in person. Mm-hmm. It's a blessing.
Absolutely. I feel like that's something that I've been trying to do since last year and going into this year, is to like meeting people out in the wild and like having face-to-face time. But I wanted to ask, you mentioned it, like, you know, the kitchen witchery of it all. What inspired you to kind of focus on brujeria and the paranormal, and not only in like your personal life, but with the podcast? Like, has it been something that you had an interest in all your life? Can you like pinpoint a spot, maybe when like a switch turned for you and you became interested in these things?
So I feel like I've always been interested in these things because I feel like if you're Mexican, if you're Latin, you're spooky. Like, we didn't make up the rules. It's in the culture. Sorry about it. But
it's in the water.
It's you know, and they tell you not to drink it, but sometimes it happens. But, you know, it was always something I was really interested in, but I think I had this like kind of internalized fear of like, oh, well, liking that stuff's evil, or liking the stuff is whatever, right?
No es de Dios.
No es de Dios, no es sagrado, es diablo, so, but I think in 2015, when I kind of went to Marie Laveau's grave and I really just became like hyper fixated on her and the fact that like she did a lot of these things and she worked in salons and really had like these connections to like society. And so that like always ensured that she had work, and she was a major practicing Catholic, and she knew that she needed the church to like, and I feel like she was just one of those people who really felt like justice needs to be served, and sometimes justice isn't served, and, based on her, Afro-Indigenous background, that makes a lot of sense. So I just really started to get fascinated with like magic, but also just like the history of it all, right? Like, the nuances, and obviously the racism and all these things that kind of like influenced New Orleans. And then that kind of sort of made me think more about like my roots and the people that I come from. And it's funny because it's like cuando lo empiezas a buscar te encuentra, and I just started really asking a lot of questions of my mom and my dad about like my ancestors and this and that, and come to find out like my ancestors, mi abuelo on my mom's side like grew agave, and he worked for like Don Javier Sousa, who was the last generation of the Sousa family before they sold the factory. And there's just so much power, I think, in like the people that we come from and our ancestors. And, one of the things that people always ask me, they're like, oh, well, I don't talk to my family. Oh, I don't like, I don't know all of my ancestors, whatever. And they kind of use that as an excuse for why they can't like figure out more about themselves. And I'm like, okay, but there are like ancestors of the land. There's ancestors of the culture. There's ancestors of the traditions. Like you can still like try to like dig into the people and the regions and the, I feel to be a bruja, to be a witch, is to be a detective and always be trying to figure out all the pieces that make sense. So I just really started getting into like magic and occulticism and like just different traditions and where they formed, and the fact that, for a lot of people, brujeria or these different like traditions kind of started as a way for people to be able to practice their religions that maybe were more, they were either maybe based on like different African traditional religions, or, there were a lot of Jewish people that escaped to Mexico as well. There was a lot of indigenous people, and it was a way of sort of practicing these things in plain sight. And like brujeria is regional, right? So it's like what people do in Jalisco is not what people do in Sonora, is not what people do in Colombia, is not what people do in Argentina. And it's just so fascinating to see how it varies in so many different places. And, it's just like, again, when you start to look for it, it all kind of falls into place. I ended up reading tarot because a friend of mine needed an art project, and they were in Ireland. They needed like a final art project. So I was like, what if you create a tarot deck? And so that, like, right after all of that was just like this head first into like tarot. And I've always been a learn by doing kind of person. So once I started reading tarot, then I started like, I was always editing podcasts in the background. And, to kind of wrap it up, I've already been talking for quite a bit, but Tía Bruja kind of came because I'd come to visit some family, and I'd realized like, holy shit, I'm someone's Tia, because some of my cousins had kids and my siblings don't have kids. And, just the idea that like I'm someone's witchy aunt just really started to make me laugh, and
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so like, I kind of just started Tía Bruja as a way to shake up the narrative about like a lot of magic and just like ideas of like limiting beliefs of like why we can't become the person that we're supposed to be, and also just like conversations about like spooky, creepy shit as a way to kind of just like, everyone else I see kind of talking about these things are very like Anglo, or like I just wanted more of a perspective from like someone who is living in the liminal space of like being Mexican American, and talking to people who are way more blessed with melanin than me, because the types of magic and life experience and all these things that we see, I think also makes us stronger. We have this like sense of self that really can't be shaken because we are made up of all the traditions and people. And, like I kind of like with finding my ancestors and like all the things, my mom is such a cooking, like she expresses her love through cooking. And so that's something I've always possessed too. And so, for like 420 in the last few years, I've been doing a lot more like kitchen witchery stuff because I like making whole menus of cannabis infused things. Because I'm also just like, why are we of the mindset that like edibles have to taste bad? Because they don't, like,
yeah.
But like I made like one year we made like vanilla lavender infused like creme brulee, and so I'm like, the sky, the possibilities are endless when it comes to edibles, people, So yeah, it's been really fun as the podcast has evolved and kind of what my interests are at the time. There are people who I've collaborated with, like I am a brand ambassador for Levo Oil and like their oil infusers, and it can infuse like a bunch of different stuff, but it's really helpful in the cooking process. And it's just been this wild ride of like, how the hell did I get here? You know what I mean? But in the best way.
Yeah. Again, as like a creative, you start branching out, and then before you know it, like you said, you have like a partnership with this like oil infusion company. Yeah, the places that podcasting will take you, people, is very interesting. I wanted to reference back, you mentioned it again, you mentioned it earlier on, is this idea of like tackling on what a lot of people would consider, and a lot of the times what actually are pretty heavy subjects. So like these radical conversations that you tried having with your other show, you decided, fuck it, I'll do it myself. And you mentioned again earlier, but like, how do you think your podcast has been able to contribute to discussions, let's say about like anti-racism, while also talking about the occult?
So one of the things that I talk about on my show a lot is divine timing. And so my show launched in June of 2020, and this was before George Floyd was murdered. Mm-hmm. And back then, when you would put a feed onto Apple, it took a lot longer. Now it can take like a few hours. Back then, it would take a few weeks. And so I submitted it out into the ether, and I was like lining up all the episodes, and then George Floyd was murdered, and I was like, well, fuck. I'm this show. I'm this tiny, tiny person. Like, what can I do? Because right now, like collectively, we're all experiencing a lot of sense of emotions with what's happening, right? And I just saw a lot of people having this incessant need to like reach out to their Black friends and be like, what's going on? Basically, and asking them to do a bunch of like labor that really was not appropriate, and really not their job. And so, I had this thought of like, well, all the Black witches to the front. And so I had sort of reworked, and it was cool because I was able to provide people with like resources and organizations they could donate to, and people who were protesting for the first time could have here like resources in St. Louis, where I'm, local to, or was local to at the time. Who to call if you get arrested, stuff like that, and it was really nice. It really made me feel like I was helping take the burden off some of my friends who were just like feeling a lot. And it really proved that like with audio, you can get a message out. And it was one of those things that I really stood by the work. And, we talked about this prior. I ended up pulling all of my catalog. And it's not because I didn't stand by my work, but now as someone who teaches occult classes, I feel like I didn't always have the best knowledge. It was sort of what was just working for me, and I've gained a lot more knowledge since then. And I don't want to give people inaccurate information, because, when you dabble in this, it is serious, like it isn't something to just be toyed with. And I just wanted to provide better information, and, I feel like I'm doing that. I think a lot of people, just need also like the verbal medicine of being told like, you can do this if you want to, and the collective, like, you know, if this person did it and they just like really dedicated themselves to it, so can you. And seeing like people live their lives authentically to themselves, like, is magic in itself. So yeah, I try to do the best that I can with the knowledge that I have to provide resources, you know, to share places that people can support, and, you know, to just do what I can to be like someone who cares about, you know, creating a world that's more full of like love and equity, and, you know, and I think that like that's the thing, is like magic is altering the reality that we want to live in, and I feel like by living, you know, true to what you want to see in the world is how you do it. So also I think that like when you look at a lot of magic stuff, especially stuff in the US, when you look at hoodoo, when you look at like magic, brujeria and stuff, it all comes out of a place of social justice, hiding in plain sight, being safe, right? Because when you look at a lot of the herbs that are used to kind of keep spirits away as protection, it's a lot of like peppers, crushed up peppers, it's a lot of dried peppers, you know, so where do you find a lot of that, right? So a lot of, and I mean, like, I think people maybe don't want to admit this, but like a lot of the most powerful magic comes from like people just trying to protect themselves, you know, because there were systemic obstacles and violence that they had to deal with. So yeah, I just feel like my show is like a way of continuing to do the work and to give power to people who need it.
Absolutely. And thank you for doing that also. I know that, you know, taking on that kind of work it can be really heavy and it can feel really daunting at times. To be very honest, it can feel hopeless sometimes when you see the way that the world is, but it is work that needs to be done, and they are conversations that need to be had. Let's take a quick break. And going back to the idea of brujeria and what it might mean for some people, I'm curious as to what your thoughts might be surrounding this, because it's a topic that I brought up on my most recent episode about La Llorona and how these stories have survived centuries. And like you said earlier, brujeria a lot of the times is about like hiding in plain sight. And we also had a quick conversation on, I think Twitter it was, about like how brujeria is kind of like traditional or indigenous practices surviving through colonialism and like holding on to as much as it can, but using like Catholic language and motifs and practices to keep those practices going. I don't know. I'm curious about what your deeper take is on that.
Yeah, I definitely do think that brujeria, it's such a heavy like term, right? Because just in sort of the gathering of knowledge that I've accumulated, because I have a deep fascination with like Mexico and the Mexican Inquisition and like what people being like murdered, you know, for witchcraft or what they deemed was witchcraft. And I think that us in like Latin America, we're very like blessed in the sense that a lot of herbalism and like natural remedios and stuff like that was able to continue on because it wasn't seen as blasphemous. It wasn't seen as like evil or whatever. And I really do think that brujeria was a way of just labeling anything that wasn't just like Catholic, right? Anything that was sort of outside of the norm. So I think that, and Laura Davila, who she goes by Daphne La Hechicera, one of the things that she said to me that's really stuck is like Mexican Catholicism is kind of a mockery in itself, right? Because it's this fusion of a lot of like indigenous traditions and the, you know, the influence of like Spanish Catholicism and sort of having to adapt it for like the common like working class people, you know? Yeah. And it's just interesting that because of that, because you have this fusion of like people who are practicing the religion, you also then have this fusion of how people practice the culture. And the thing with like that, I just take a lot of like Catholics are so funny to me, because Catholics will be like, brujeria is del diablo, but I'm like, okay, but you anoint your candles too, you put oil over them, you're putting like, you know. And for me, I think that like brujeria, because I feel like brujeria, just like, or, you know, praying, rezando a lo normal, it's the same thing, you know. It's just like the preparations that you take in kind of ensuring that your goals happen, you know. It's how much time you're putting into it, and then, you know, putting this thing into the world and making it happen, you know. And something that I take, people love to like really cast the finger of like bruja, and, you know, whatever, but they nunca se juzgan por todo el chisme, and that's mal de ojo, friend, you know. Like when you like, okay, I have a difficult thing with chisme, right? Because I think in some ways it was the way for the people in the town to also spread awareness about like things that were happening on haciendas and the violence that people were experiencing, right? So I think there's a lot of power in chisme, but at the same time, I think that like sometimes chisme comes from a place of like mal de ojo, jealousy. You just have to like put dirt on someone's name because you can't stand that they're doing okay, you know? And I take a lot of bother with the second one, because I also think that like, you know, if you spent as much time putting dirt on other people's names as you did about caring and growing and turning your life reality into what you wanted to, it would probably be a lot easier. But yeah, I just think that, like, honestly, you know, being Católico, just like being a bruja, is about using different elements to create the reality that you're trying to bring into the world. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of it has to do also with like intention, you know. Some people see brujeria as just innately an evil thing. And people can sometimes see chisme as like a bad habit. But I think it is all about intention. Whatever you do in your life, you know, you should examine your intentions behind them. And it's also a conversation that I try to have with Susto is, what are the intentions, you know, behind sharing these stories, behind talking about a word that is used a lot in these stories is drunkards. You know, what is the intention behind talking about people with substance abuse issues in certain lights, you know, and how can we reframe or reappropriate those intentions? To kind of shift gears and take a hard left, I want to ask you if you have any of your own paranormal experiences that you would like to share.
So, okay, I am back in Tequila, Jalisco, and I have a lot of weird experiences here. But the one that I will share with you, because I can send you the photo and you can see if you can see it too, is I was staying at my tia's house and I was recording some audio. And it was kind of late at night, and I had, you know, just sort of like, because I'm a content creator, and so you're always sometimes taking photos of your setups and just kind of, you know, whatever. Yeah. I'd taken a photo of my setup, I'd done the recording, and then the next day I'm looking at it, and I'm like, oh my God, that's a bunch of fucking ghosts, you know? Like, and it was just one of those where it's like, okay, this isn't just me. So I sent it to you. Let me see if you can like see anything, and if not,
oh my God, I'm already scared.
If you can't, I'll send you the one where it's a little bit closer up, and if you still can't, I'll tell you what I see. Oh my God. Okay, I'm gonna send you the closer up one. Please do not
tell me that is a face.
There's a lot of faces.
You're fucking kidding me. Oh my God, I am.
I'll show you. That kind of looks like a malevolent face, but that kind of looks very Nosferatu-like. I don't know if you see that one, but the one that I see, it's like a man who's sitting down and he has kind of like a barba, kind of like with a reddish tint to it, and it's like his like wife is kind of standing behind him. I don't know if you see that, but then behind her is kind of a malevolent face. But yeah, I saw this and I was just like, oh my God, this is creepy.
Okay, here's the thing. Here's what I'm seeing now. I'm so upset right now. Is now what I'm seeing is, so immediately I saw like smaller faces, but now I'm looking at it like from a distance and I can see larger faces.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
there's one that is like right next to like the curve of your pinky.
Yeah.
And I hate that.
Yeah, I don't like that one.
Can I post these?
Yes, you can totally post them.
This is disgusting. Oh my god. Oh, I got like the nastiest chills. Oh my god. Okay, I cannot wait for people
But
to
yeah,
see
and it's
these.
funny because, like, you know, Mexican people love stuff. My parents would have, like, we would all be at a get together and they're like, Rebequita, saca las fotos de los fantasmas. And I was like,
Exactly.
I was like,
Exactly.
okay.
Oh my god.
But yeah, so that's one that comes to mind. Another one that comes to mind, I think one of my first actually is I talk a lot about, like, I love Alton, Illinois. Like, it's just, I don't know, like the architecture, the space, but it's very full of ghost activity because it was one of the first stops of the Underground Railroad.
Oh wow.
And I actually went into a house in the basement that, like, the tunnel was part of the Underground Railroad because this is so funny because some people thought that and maybe at times myself too, and I guess it depended on where you were, but parts of the Underground Railroad were actual underground, like, tunnels, you know? It wasn't just like running, you know, potentially through a woodsy area or whatever. It was very different depending on the layout, whatever, what have you. But yeah, so we're in this tunnel and I'm staring up at this light bulb and it's green, and, you know, because it's one of those, like, when you turn it off, it kind of has that iridescent kind of glow to it.
Yeah.
And I look away, it's all dark. I look away again, it's green again. And less than 10 seconds after it moved, I guess, a girl started screaming and had her hair pulled, and then they pulled us all out. So whatever was in front of me moved and decided that it had beef with her. So yeah.
I know. I'm like, what did that girl do? Was she like low key racist? And the ghost was like, gotcha.
You know what I wonder sometimes is, like, if the ancestors, like, they know, because my best friend, love her to death, sweetest person ever, in the last year found out that her, I don't know what great, whatever, but they used to enslave people. So that's something I was thinking about. I'm like, oh my God, like, if you had cross paths with this spirit, or, like, you know, one of your ancestors had, and they just really had beef with you, would they just, like, throw some bows about it? And I'm like, maybe.
Listen, me personally, as if I was a spirit, I would. I'm like, I don't know what awaits me in the afterlife, but if I could get like a day pass to the mortal realm to like fuck around with people, I love to scare people as is.
Like, nothing you bug.
Already, so yeah, so like I would love to come back as a spirit and like spook some people.
Yeah, it'd be great.
Well, so speaking of your recent move, I looked up a couple of things about tequila, because we wanted to talk about haunted distilleries, but I was like, I don't know, I just had like a real interest in looking in distilleries in the area, and I found some like landmarks. I wanted to see if you knew of any of these, either before getting there or you've discovered them recently. There's, I think, 3 of them that I pulled from this article, but the first one that it mentions is something called the Devil's Alley. Does that ring any bells so far?
Where, so it's interesting. Callejón del Diablo?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard of it. I've never actually been there, though.
So this one, and it's related, I think, to the episode that you just did recently with Guillermo and Billy.
Yeah.
Souza. Yes, or to their family at least. It says that tequila also has a legend of making deals with the devil, and you talk about this on that episode. It says that it was Don Zenobio Souza who, according to the myth, sold his soul to the beast. Later, when he died by natural causes, his faithful steed is said to have followed him to death. Today, witnesses in Tequila claim having seen Don Zenobio's black horse, named Satan, according to this article, taking people to the gates of hell.
Ooh, I haven't heard that. I'll have to ask around. So it's interesting because a lot of my family members, like, they're in their 80s, their late 70s, their 80s. And so they wouldn't have known Zenobio, but they knew Javier. So I feel like there are certain places that the family used to own, because a lot of it, you know, I think when they sold, I think they only kept like 30%. So unfortunately, it's a lot of like foreign people who own a lot of the old property. But My point being is that it's kind of nice to get their perspectives on like legends and stuff, because they're like, oh no, yeah, that's real. You know, like that's real. And so I don't know about the specific callejon, but there is the talk about La Cueva. There is the talk, like, I'll even tell you this, my aunt, and I'm excited to do an episode about this in the future, but my aunt bought a house from Don Javier Sousa, and it was around the corner from where the factory used to be. And so my grandmother lived there, and, you know, but I would always have this really eerie feeling when I would stay there, and it would get really, really late, because we would go meet up with my cousin because he worked there. So we would all, you know, with my aunt, like a bunch of us would go to kind of just make sure he made it home safely. And I just remember when we would walk down that street, it just felt very uncomfortable. And I'm just like, oh, I don't know. There's something there. I haven't figured it out. You know, I'm still scratching the surface, but
yeah,
that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, well, yeah, it could be this man and his horse looking around.
Maybe that's the street, because if it's that guy, it's like between where his house, like maybe. Interesting.
Well, it would have to be what is it, a crossroads, right? Because that's kind of like
it is
part of the instructions. Yeah, it has to be at a crossroads where you make a deal like that. Well, who knows? So another one that I found in that article, it's about Tequila's sleeping dragon. So there's a legend that claims that beneath the streets of Tequila dwells a sleeping dragon, whose main duty is to protect the plantations and caves of the region. According to the myth, his head is buried under the white quarry cross in the atrium of St. James Parish, and popular belief says that any cool breeze that's felt in that area is just the breath of the dragon.
I will tell you this, when it gets really breezy here, it kind of happens very quick. And it's very, like, strong. Like, if you did laundry and you didn't clip it up on your rooftop, sorry about you.
Gone.
It's all gone. So, no, I love that. Interesting. And there's a lot of mythology, because I can't remember the exact term right now, but there is like obsidian everywhere, and it's volcanic ash. It's stone made from like volcanic ash. And there's an indigenous word that means like pointed rocks. And that's where the term like tequila comes from. But it's, I don't know, it's just so fascinating, because there does seem to be this energy around like a fire because of the volcano and everything. So interesting. Dragon. Love to hear it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and it's interesting that it points to, and you also brought it up, the volcanoes, or like the volcanic stone. The last bit that I found in this article was about, it's the legend of Los Lavaderos. And it said it's a legend of this person named Doña Felix, who was a lady who throughout her life used volcanic stone in laundry rooms to do people's laundry. And according to the legend, that if you visit that place at night, that you can still hear the ghosts scrubbing the clothes on the volcanic stone. So,
okay, that's one I have to re-release, because I talked to Chava, who is Tequila en Línea, and I'll send you the link for that. He posts all the happenings in Tequila, and there's a lot of stuff that happens here. And the thing that's kind of cool about her is that she was a very small lady. And she had like a specific little like bench, banquita, that she would move over, and like she would stand up on top to be able to wash her clothes. And because she's so small, after she passed, people said that like the little bench would just move in front of her station. So they've like put a brick there so she can like get up. So yeah, and it's funny because like, and again, I have to release this one now. That's given me a reason to, but like Chava mentions, like that would have been like Tequila en Línea in the day, you know, like there's and I'll send it to you. There's a photo of the lavaderos where these women are just ripping each other's hair out. And it's like, imagine how messy it would get at times.
Oh my God. Over like drama?
Yeah, because it's like all of the women in the town would go and wash their clothes there.
Oh my God.
So, you know, because this is back in the old day. They didn't necessarily have like a place to wash. So if you were in a place where you couldn't, you know, have a washing area, you would go to this public one because it's kind of just there for everyone. But yeah, women would like rip their hair out getting into fights. Like maybe that, that's your station. And Maria Elena, like, se puso en un pleito con su marido and she's making her problem your problem. And it's like, all right.
Pinche Maria Elena.
Oh my God.
Wow.
Like, mind your business. Like, your inability to pick a good man is not my problem.
Honestly, the way that we would be in there causing mess.
But yeah, so no, I'm really glad that you mentioned that one because that's only one that I've become aware of in the last few years. And it's really cool. And it's one of those that I love. I love leyendas, but I love leyendas that especially like have merit, right? Like these are people that existed. These are people that lived. There's something nice about just being kind of immortalized through a ghost story that is accurate,
Yeah, for sure. I think something that I always mention is like my belief or my understanding of like spirits or ghosts is through energy. And so you think of these like spots that are high energy places. So I'm sure this like washateria, was a place where people were in and out of all the time, and a place where people built community. Whether or not it was harmonious, there was like elevated levels of energy because this is where people spent time together, either enjoying each other's company or participating in drama. So yeah, like it makes sense that a place like this would store that energy. I'm not sure what the properties are of volcanic stone, but I know like there are certain stones that are referenced in the paranormal putas. They talk about it, how people think that restrooms are places of high activity because it's like a trifecta. There are mirrors, there's water, and then there's stone, which usually the toilets, they're made of stones, right? Certain stones can hold on to like energy. So I'm wondering if, maybe volcanic, the stone that they use in this region is able to store some of that energy as well and contribute to the quote unquote hauntings.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised because the stone is obsidiano, so obsidian, and I know it's a big protection stone. And I do feel, because I wear like this little water drop, this black obsidian like water drop, and I do feel like when I have situations with the paranormal, I don't feel as like uncomfortable about it because I do feel grounded, but I also feel like this stone like collects my fear essentially. Like, it's just like, all right, bitch, you decided to do this. Like we're holding you down. So I do feel like I need to like kind of cleanse it a lot. But I don't know, like I love being back here because it's one of those things where I'm like, do I really like interact with spirits, or do I just think I do? And then I'm here like, no, this is real.
Yeah. No, they will remind you what the truth is real quick. Oh my goodness. Well, Bex, thank you so much for joining me today. What can listeners expect from you and from Tu Tía Bruja in the future? Is there anything exciting going on or any collaborations on the horizon that you're looking forward to?
So I'm excited because we're starting the year off with a collaboration with you. I mean, I'm always open to collaboration. I've been really fortunate to find a lot of people, and I feel like I'm going to sit down and have a thought because even though the, new moon wasn't that long ago, I still feel like it's the beginning of the year. It's so full of possibilities. So I think I'm going to make a list of all the people that I've been wanting to reach out to and just haven't because of life and stuff. And, again, like the spaghetti theory, if anybody's interested, like we'll make it happen. I feel like this is just the year I'm going to try a lot of different things. So yeah. I'm just excited to see what it brings. If y'all want to listen to my little oddball little show, it's Tu Tía Bruja, and you can catch it everywhere you listen to podcasts.
And where can they find you on social media?
Yeah, I'm at Tu Tía Bruja on TikTok, Instagram, and I use Threads. I don't know. I'm trying to get used to it. It's kind of like right now the Wild West, but I'm on X, and I definitely don't do anything there, but you can find me in all those places.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for joining me today and for sharing your experiences and, just for being an all around and for being our tia.
I'm trying, but like y'all were not raised right.
I'm calling your mom. All right. Well, thank you so much, and I'll talk to you later, Bex.
Sounds good. Bye.
Bye. Welcome back, ghoul friends. Thank you so much for listening today. And thank you again to Bex for agreeing to take some time and be on the show and share her perspectives and her insights with you all. Again, if y'all are not following her, please make sure to do so online. Visit her website, listen to her show. I am also going to appear on one of her episodes. So after you listen to this, swing by your Tia's house, to your Tia's podcast, and give it a listen. Like we mentioned in her podcast, it took a while to get there to record it. There was just a number of things that happened, and that is why I truly appreciate Bex, and I respect her because she fully gets it. She is also an independent creator, and so she was like, you know what, we're going to be patient with each other, we're going to support each other. So just every time I work with other creators, I'm like, wow. Again, make sure to go support her. And if you would like to support Susto, you already know the easiest way to do that is to share the show with one of your ghoul friends. Tell them all about it, have them listen to it, like, subscribe, leave a review on Apple Podcasts, answer the Q&A on Spotify, or leave your own scary stories in there. Aside from leaving your scary stories, you can submit any of your stories, any of your pictures, video, audio, whatever you have to me via @SustoPodcast on every social media platform, sustopodcast@gmail.com, or by visiting the website sustopodcast.com, where you can also check out some pretty sweet merch. Before I stop pushing all of that stuff on you, I do want to say one last thing. If you are interested in supporting Susto financially, again, I am a one-person team. You can do so by visiting patreon.com/SustoPodcast. And a huge shout out to this episode's patrons. You are Liza, Sadie, Rachel, Alejandra, Luther, April, Mario, Eva, D, Victoria, Josette, Sam, Angela and Co, Mandy, Jules, Lori, Jeannie, Desiree, Anna C, Ashes, Neresa, Rachel A, Azucena Rios, Anna, Marlene, Chata, Lainey, Desiree A, Aaliyah King, Holly, and Cynthia. Thank you so much. I will talk to you in the next one, and say hi to your Tia. Bye.